Welcome back to Questions for the Rector. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, is the Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary here in Reading, Pennsylvania, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
Well, it looks like our friend Archbishop Viganò has gotten himself into a bit of hot water recently.
Yes, I would say so. Actually, he had been in hot water. It's the fact that the Vatican has responded to him that makes it hotter yet. So, yes, go ahead.
So he was asked to come to a trial, and he said he wasn't going. He had no intention of going.
Right. And I think he was correct in saying that the decision has already been taken, and it was just a formality to, and he got an email to that effect, which is very insulting. When Archbishop Lefebvre was in trouble, so to speak, with the modernists, they sent and I remember it, a limousine pulled up from the nunciature in Switzerland, and a messenger got out and delivered it to him. But to send somebody an email like, how are you doing? I mean, emails are very informal things. You don't get emails from judges, etc. You get documents.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a slap in the face.
An intended one.
Oh, definitely.
So he posted a response on X, and we obviously don't have time to read all of it, and all of it's not necessarily relevant. So I'm going to read parts of it and have His Excellency comment. I consider the accusations made against me as a matter of honor. I believe that the very wording of the charges confirms the theses that I have repeatedly supported in my interventions. It is no coincidence that the accusation against me concerns the questioning of the legitimacy of Jorge Maria Bergoglio and the rejection of Vatican II. The Council represents the ideological, theological, moral, and liturgical cancer of which the Bergoglian Synodal Church is necessary metastasis.
Yes. First of all, the questioning. Questioning is not a declaration or an affirmation. To question is beating around the bush, I would say. I mean, yes, I agree with him fundamentally, but I think he needs to say he is or he isn't. All of the logic that he has given so far about defect of consent, etc., and all of the what's wrong with Vatican II, it's a cancer, all of that points to not only the non-papacy of Bergoglio, but the non-papacy of everyone who promulgated that council and all of the conciliar effluent, all of everything that came out of the council and all the so-called post-conciliar magisterium and disciplines. I mean, he's right to go back to the council and call it exactly what he did. But that has certain ecclesiological implications. The church is the immaculate spouse of Christ. She cannot call a council that is cancerous and full of moral and dogmatic cancer and feed that to the faithful, to not conclude that they are false popes, leaves a big void. To simply question, just to call something into question, you have to resolve whether that man is the pope or not. You can't say, well, I don't know if he is or not. Your salvation depends on your submission to the Roman pontiff. You cannot be in doubt about something which pertains to your eternal salvation. You have to resolve the doubt in some way. And just to say to question it is not sufficient. These are very, very serious theological issues. And what he's saying has enormous implication. And he is logically committed to say that these men, not only Bergoglio, but also at least Paul VI on, are not true Roman pontiffs because of defect of consent.
It is necessary for the episcopate, the clergy, and the people of God to seriously question whether it is consistent with the profession of the Catholic faith to passively witness the systematic destruction of the Church by its leaders, exactly as other subversives are destroying civil society.
Yes, of course, but again, the question business. I mean, he's in a position, he's part of the hierarchy. He should be saying what is, not that you should be questioning this. I think it's weakness there, and I think it's a dubious trumpet. He's giving the logic and not drawing the conclusion.
And he gives us problems with Vatican II in the paragraph before this, but Your Excellency, he uses the term people of God.
Yes, that is a Vatican II term. Rarely did you see it here and there in the Fathers, but it was never used before the Council commonly. You would say the faithful, the Catholic faithful. But that people of God was used in order to, it's part of what we call, Father Cicada called Frankenchurch. That is that the Church of Christ extends to churches and religions that are not Roman Catholic. You see, so that means, and the analogy was, it's like sewing Frankenstein together with various body parts, so he called it Frankenchurch. That was used precisely for Frankenchurch, that heresy of Vatican II. So it's just something to avoid because, it's people of God,
Bergoglio is for the church what other world leaders are for their nations: traitors, subversives, final liquidators of traditional society, and certain of impunity. The vice of consent on Bergoglio's part in accepting the election is based precisely on the evident alienness of his government and teaching action compared to what any Catholic of any time expects from the Vicar of Christ and from the successor of the Prince of the Apostles. Everything that Bergoglio does constitutes an offense and a provocation to the entire Catholic Church, to its saints of all times, to the martyrs who were killed in odium fidei, to the popes of all times up to the Second Vatican Council.
I would agree with all of that. But again, the conclusion is not drawn. That argues without any question at all that these men never reigned as true popes.
Well, to the popes of all times up to the Second Vatican
Yes,
Council.
yes.
He seems to keep coming up to the door
Yes.
and not opening it. Your
And I
Excellency.
applaud him for going back to the council. It's not a Bergoglio problem, it's a council problem. The council is the source of all of the rot. And everybody, all of those so-called popes that promulgated it and all the bishops, etc., who are all imbued with those errors of Vatican II, they are the ones that are guilty, and they need to be called out and accused of all the things that he says there. They're traitors. It's true. And traitors cannot hold authority. If a general in the army is handing over his men to the enemy and betraying them to the enemy, he's a traitor. Does he have authority? No, frankly, I think the army would probably shoot him. Not that I'm encouraging that, but I'm saying that there would be such a reaction to that, such a visceral reaction that you are acting against the very purpose of your existence. You're supposed to bring us to victory. Instead, you're going to hand us over to the enemy. And that's what these prelates are doing, these Novus Ordo prelates. He's absolutely right about all of that. He needs to draw the conclusions. The Pope is everything in the Catholic Church. I would compare him to the hub of a wheel. Whereas the wheel cannot turn, cannot stay on the axle if that hub is not strong and if everything is not right about that hub. Everything turns on him. All of the assistance of the Holy Ghost to the Church is through him. And we cannot have a gray image of him, or maybe he is, maybe he isn't. We have to question yes or no. Yes or no. And if he is, he has a solemn right to our obedience if he is Pope. If he is not the Pope, we have a solemn obligation to denounce him. It's as clear as that. And to dance around that subject is really to waste your time, frankly.
This is also and mainly an offense to the divine head of the Church, our Lord Jesus Christ, whose sacred authority Bergoglio exercises to the detriment of the mystical body, with an action that is too systematic and coherent to appear to be the result of mere inability. In the work of Bergoglio and his circle, the Lord's warning is realized. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but who inwardly are ravenous wolves. With them I am honored to not have or want any ecclesial communion. Theirs is a lobby, which conceals its complicity with the masters of the world to deceive many souls and prevent any resistance to the establishment of the kingdom of the Antichrist. I think, as what you said, Your Excellency, if if he is the Pope, to say such a thing, with them I am honored to not have or want any ecclesial communion.
Again, is he the Pope? If you are saying that he is the Pope and you are not in communion with him, you are a schismatic.
I mean, it's a horrifying thing for a Catholic to say such a thing if the person is the Pope.
Yes. Is he the Pope or not? See, this question constantly comes up in this thing, and he's confused about, you can't be in communion with the church and not with the Pope.
Maybe he thinks he's in partial communion, Your Excellency.
Well, he uses the term in there, full communion, which is a Novus Ordo term which comes from the Protestants, because they're all in partial communion with each other. It's like Humpty Dumpty. They've been trying to put themselves together ever since the Reformation. And so they come down to these common denominators, which, I believe Christ is the Lord. That's all you have to do.
It's kind of risky.
Even that might be a little bit too much. And so they're all in partial communion, the Methodists, the Baptists, and all of this. And so that was invented by the Protestants, that idea. And it's alien. You don't see that anywhere in Catholic theology before the Council. Nowhere. It doesn't exist. Either in communion or you're not.
It sounds a lot like let your yes be yes and your no be no. I seem to have heard that
I think a very famous person said that.
Faced with the dicastery's accusations, I claim, as successor of the apostles, to be in full communion with the Roman Catholic Apostolic Church, with the magisterium of the Roman pontiffs, and with the uninterrupted doctrinal, moral, and liturgical tradition that they have faithfully preserved. So the previous paragraph, I say, I am honored to not have or want any ecclesial communion with these people, but I claim to be in full communion with the Roman Catholic Apostolic Church. Is that reconcilable, Your Excellency?
Again, is he the Pope or not? You cannot be in communion with the Roman Catholic Church and all of those other things, which he mentions, if you're refusing communion to the Pope, the reigning Pope. It doesn't work. He embodies all of those things by his very nature, by his very office. And so to say, I'm in communion with all of that, but I'm not in communion with you, Bergoglio, without saying that he is not the Pope, makes him vulnerable to the accusation of schism.
I think our watchers and listeners have heard up to this point, Your Excellency, that the implied question you have for almost all these paragraphs is he the Pope or not? Is Vatican II Catholic or not?
Yes.
Which is not anything different from what you've been saying for many years.
I think he has done a job on Vatican II. I think that statement that it's a cancer and, moral, dogmatic, that's pretty good. I think he did a job on that. But he has failed to draw the conclusions. He is not addressing the papacy of the Vatican II so-called popes.
Well, let's see what you think of this statement on Vatican II, Your Excellency. I repudiate the neo-modernist errors inherent in the Second Vatican Council and in the so-called post-conciliar magisterium, in particular in matters of collegiality, ecumenism, religious freedom, secular state, and liturgy. So he repudiates the errors in the Second Vatican Council, which is allegedly an ecumenical council of the Church. He refers to something called the post-conciliar magisterium, and then he calls out a number of these errors. Again,
is that a valid council? Just as is Bergoglio and the Vatican II popes, in quotation marks, are they valid Roman Catholic popes? Is that a valid Catholic council, ecumenical council?
If it were a valid Catholic council, Your Excellency, could you say, I repudiate the neo-modernist errors in an ecumenical Catholic council?
No, because that has been promulgated to the whole church. All of those errors have been promulgated to the whole church. And that means that the church has defected from its mission, and it does not have the assistance of the Holy Ghost, if all of that is true. And it is no better than the Church of England or some other, the Lutheran Church or anything. It's just a bunch of people that have come together to form some sort of organization, religious organization. No, I mean, everything is on the line here. And he's not addressing the central issues.
Well, the comment section from the R&R crowd, Your Excellency, might say, well, Your Excellency was just a pastoral council, so don't worry, it doesn't count.
Well, that's a whole other show. Every council has addressed something pastoral, including Nicaea, including Trent. And there's many quotes. Paul VI said in November that the council contained many acts of extraordinary magisterium, which means solemn magisterium.
He said it was more important than Nicaea, I think.
He said,
VI,
yes,
in
that
some
the council
aspects.
was more important than Nicaea. And he made that the documents of the council are necessary to accept it. And, it was not some sort of, I think we should use television sets, or, it's something purely pastoral, in the sense we should, take the collection at a different time, or, I'm exaggerating, but it was not simply pastoral. It contained a lot of doctrine in it. And really the pastoral was very secondary. I mean, those pastoral documents about seminaries and religious life, they are hardly ever cited. No one ever reads those things.
Whereas the dogmatic constitution on the church is frequently cited.
Yes, and Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes, etc. The decree on ecumenism, those are all touching on dogma.
I repudiate, reject, and condemn the scandals, errors, and heresies of Jorge Maria Bergoglio, who manifests an absolutely tyrannical management of power, exercised against the purpose that legitimizes authority in the church, an authority that is vicarious of that of Christ, and as such must obey him alone. This separation of the papacy from its own legitimizing principle, which is Christ, the pontiff transforms the ministerium into a self-referential tyranny.
Yes, again, avoiding the elephant in the room, which is whether he's the Pope or not. All of that logically points to the fact, all of that language points to the fact that he is not the Pope, that he does not have the authority to rule the church. All of that logically points to that. You could not go anywhere else but that, but he doesn't say it.
And I've asked you this 2 or 3 times when we've talked about Archbishop Viganò, New York City, but why is he walking this thin line that he's invented?
I don't know, because he doesn't lack courage. He's a mystery to me. I cannot understand him. He's saying it. As a matter of fact, SSP X took it as a statement of Sedevacantism. The very point is that it is not a statement of Sedevacantism. I just don't know. He's a mystery. I do not know the answer to that question. I don't know why.
With this Bergoglian church, no Catholic worthy of the name can be in communion, because it acts in clear discontinuity and rupture with all the popes of history and with the Church of Christ. Is there a Bergoglian church, Your Excellency?
No. The very problem that we are facing is that the modernists did not found their own church. But as I have said in many other interviews, that they resolved after Pius X's reign to submerge and to gradually appear again, and to little by little take over the hierarchy and to have their day, using the institutions of the church to promulgate their false doctrines. If they had separated, as what we call the old Catholics did in 1870, because they did not like papal infallibility, if they had separated, they would just have died off, just as the old Catholics practically have died off. I mean, it's an insignificant nothing. It's, as they say today, it's a nothing burger, and no one would have paid attention to them. But because they got hold of the Catholic institutions by means of having one of their own sitting on the throne of Peter, however invalidly, the people just have accepted all of the heresy that stems from modernism. So there is no separate church. Now, what he might mean there is the church that Bergoglio has made, or something that he may not be saying exactly what I'm criticizing him for, but it's not clear. When you're talking about theological things, you have to be very, very careful and precise. And so to say that there's a Bergoglian church and that is different from the Roman Catholic Church, I would disagree with that. I think that he is a person who is a modernist, who has no power to rule the church, but is unfortunately elected in a legal manner. and the same. So you have the whole structure of the church with these invaders, you might say, or these tourists.
He does say clear discontinuity and rupture with the popes of history.
Yes, it's all the logic. The logic is as clear as day.
And now we're coming to some familiar ground, some familiar phrases. Your Excellency, shall we say, the Rome of all time, things like this. 50 years ago, in that same palace of the Holy Office, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre was summoned and accused of schism for having rejected Vatican II. His defense is mine. His words are mine. His arguments are mine, before which the Roman authorities could not condemn him for heresy, having to wait for him to consecrate some bishops to have the pretext to declare him schismatic and revoke his excommunication when he was already dead. The pattern is repeated even after 10 years have demonstrated the prophetic choice of Archbishop Lefebvre.
Well, that's not exactly accurate. Archbishop Lefebvre never condemned Vatican II on the whole. And also, he when he was negotiating in the early 80s, he was promulgating the formula to accept Vatican II in the light of tradition. So to say that he...
his words are mine, his defense is mine.
Yeah, I mean, he was not saying at that time. Now, when you say Archbishop Lefebvre, it depends on which phase he was in, In 1976 to 78, he was in a very hardline phase. But when John Paul II came, that idea of, because John Paul II said, well, we can accept that, accepting Vatican II in the light of tradition. So to say that he was opposed to Vatican II, definitely you could say he was opposed to the errors of Vatican II. But to say that that they accused him of heresy, no. As a matter of fact, he signed the protocol on May 5th of 1988, in which he accepted that the Vatican named their bishops. This modernist Vatican that he had been complaining about for all those years named their bishops.
Which is a thoroughly Catholic principle.
Absolutely it is. They have the supreme right to. If you say that man is the Pope, he has the supreme right to name the bishops. And then he repudiated it the next day, realizing that they would name bad bishops. So to say that, he was took a hard line against the council, etc., I don't think that that's accurate, And the reason he was excommunicated was because he went ahead and consecrated bishops without the permission of the person whom he says is the Pope. That is worthy of excommunication in the new Code of Canon Law, meaning the 1983 Code of Canon Law, which they accept.
I don't want to go too far down this road, Your Excellency, but I'm just thinking back to the consecration itself. I think in the ceremony, it's asked, do you have the mandate? And he said, yes, we have the mandate. And then they read some statement, about how we have this mandate from eternal Rome, and,
yes.
and this is how it's
No, he didn't have a mandate. He was in May, John Paul II was the vicar of Christ. By the middle of June, he was the Antichrist. All of it all changed, you see. But never did he say he's not the Pope. Never.
But he did say that you could say that he was not the Pope.
He said the famous thing in Oyster Bay that I don't say that the Pope is not the Pope, but I don't say either that you cannot say that the Pope is not the Pope.
It's a lot funnier in French, Your Excellency.
Yes, I could say it, but yes. But in other words, and there are, even at that time, there were crypto-sedes, Sedevacantists, in the Society of St. Pius X, and today there are crypto-Sedevacantists. Based on that, in other words, he said, as long as you don't stir it up, that was his idea, is that he didn't want Rome to be offended by that, but if you feel that he's not the Pope. He told Father Guépin, and Father Guépin told me this personally, may he rest in peace, that in the car, Father Guépin would drive him around, in the car, Archbishop Lefebvre said to him, I don't think Paul VI is the Pope. Now, Father Guépin is a person who would not repeat anything false. I mean, he was a person of sterling character, and anybody who knew him would affirm that, even his enemies. He was of sterling character, and that's what...
Well, but I have to imagine when Archbishop Lefebvre said that to his entourage, they said, well, Your Excellency, you can't say that.
Yes, well, but the whole thing was his effort and all of his idea was to somehow legitimize legally his fraternity of St. Pius X. And so he did a lot of moving around theologically in order to do that. You see, and so he, I don't think you can lock him into a certain position. It depended on what he was feeling that day.
I think you've hit on something really important, Your Excellency, that if we look at, let's ignore some of the statements that the Archbishop made in 1990 and 1991, where he was getting towards his death and he started to realize what the real problem was. But the majority of his work after the council was, as you say, to carve out a corner chapel for tradition. Let us have, what was it called, Your Excellency? The experiment of tradition?
Yes.
And effectively, the fraternity of St. Peter are his are his legacy.
Yes.
They have
his grandchildren, yes.
They have a side chapel in the corner of tradition, and they're probably doing what he would have been asked to do, which is, if you want to talk about Vatican II privately, just don't talk about it from the pulpit. Realistically, I look at the fraternity of St. Peter as the real successor of the Archbishop, because that's what his project was around. He didn't really denounce the council as not a council. He said there were some errors, and then he wasn't able to explain how an ecumenical council of the church would have errors.
Right. And when he was faced with Cardinal Gut, I think he was interviewed in Rome in 1974, Cardinal Gut gave him the whole argument of, are you going to say that the Vicar of Christ has promulgated a mass that is evil?
And his answer was, I do not know who promulgated it.
Yes. Which, was a back out. And we know who promulgated it. It's very obvious who did.
There's a signature at the bottom.
Right. There's, that would be like saying, we don't know what's in the ketchup bottle. It was a cop out. It's the only word for it. And I think that he should have said yes. But he knew exactly what Gut would say. And then how could you say that? So he knew exactly, but
they knew where he was. They knew where he was being led, and he didn't.
Yes, and he backed out of it. And then when he came back from Rome, I remember, because he had made his declaration, his manifesto in 1974, and it was very strong, and I thought it was wonderful.
You and the hardliners are very excited.
Oh, he came back from Rome and he said, "Well, I told them that I did that in anger." And I practically fell off my chair when he said it. I can remember to this day, 1974, which is exactly 50 years ago. And how could, what? that he crumbled in front of them, I did it in anger, So you can't pin him down. I mean, I always admire the man. He set the traditional movement on its feet. I think you must give him that. He made it very popular. He really gave it a lot of fire. I admire him for that, but he was very, very ambivalent about his positions. And a lot of it was, what was happening in Rome, or what mood he was in, or who criticized him, or it's the way he was.
Well, and the legacy that we've seen with SSP X clergy and SSP X faithful, I've been told that some of their priests use the pre-55 Holy Week. Some of them say this thing about Vatican II. Others say, well, I would happily cooperate with the diocese.
Yes.
Because there are no principles in the Archbishop, and he basically gave his spiritus to the society. Their priests don't have clear principles, and they disagree on basic things all the time.
The Society of St. Pius X was always plagued by that, the different factions, because you could see Archbishop Lefebvre in each light. You see, you could quote him as you will, for your side or their side, or.
So there are no factions in the Roman Catholic Institute about Vatican II, Your Excellency.
The very purpose of all of those what we call those documents that I did for the directories was to avoid that. I saw that as a flaw in the Society of St. Pius X. Everything is set out, spelled out, and you must agree with it. If you don't agree with it, you should go. Not that we're holding that against you or anything like that. It's just we want pastoral and doctrinal unity in our group and our society, or whatever you want to call it. So we have not had any problems that way of factions or anything like that.
You've often said, Your Excellency, when we talk about these ideas of relationships, that for John to be with Susie has to say that she is with John.
Yes.
And so we have a statement, his words are mine, his arguments are mine, his defense is mine. And then we heard from the Society of St. Pius X. There is, however, one point which significantly differentiates him from the founder of the Society of St. Pius X. Archbishop Viganò makes a clear declaration of Sedevacantism in his text. In other words, according to him, Pope Francis is not Pope. How does he explain this? Because of a, quote, defect of consent from Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio when accepting the papacy. This is, according to Viganò, Cardinal Bergoglio considered the papacy as something other than what it really is. He accepted the pontifical office without fully consenting, and this error resulted in the nullity of his acceptance. His pontificate would therefore be that of a placeholder. Archbishop Lefebvre and the society he founded have not ventured down that perilous road. Well, it looks like the SSPX is not with Viganò.
No, he's with them, but they're not with him. No, Viganò has made everyone unhappy. The Novus Ordo is unhappy. We are unhappy. SSPX is unhappy because he's not consistent and logical.
I did find it fascinating, Your Excellency, to see the words defect of consent in an official SSPX communique. I mean, what world are we living in?
Yes, yeah. So that's straight from the thesis, Bishop Gerard de Laurier. He's the one that hit the nail on the head, that although they are validly elected, the problem is that they intend to impose upon the church a false religion, and that is contrary to their function and purpose.
Do you accept this phraseology? His pontificate would therefore be that of a placeholder?
I don't know what he means by that. The Gerard de Laurier, Bishop Gerard de Laurier, would have said that he's sitting in the throne, but with no power. In other words, he's there, but so the see is not, strictly speaking, vacant. Vacancy would mean no one has been elected. See, so someone has been elected. He's sitting on that throne, but he has no power to rule the church. I could give you an airplane analogy.
Would this be a Bishop Sanborn interview if we didn't have an airplane?
That's right. We have to have an airplane analogy. There was a famous case a number of years ago of a pilot or co-pilot who had a fight with his girlfriend and decided everybody on the plane had to die because he had a fight with his girlfriend.
The German wings.
Yes, and crashed the plane into the Alps. Now, could you say that now he is approved by the airline? In other words, he's got all the badges and everything, that is necessary to be a legitimate co-pilot. But he doesn't have the authority from the airline to crash that plane into the if that's his intention. No one in his right mind would say that he has authority to do that simply because he's designated as a pilot. You see, so that's an analogy that the whole purpose of his piloting is to bring the airplane safely to its destination. So the whole purpose of the papacy is to promote and preserve the Catholic faith, Catholic discipline, everything that is in its tradition. If you do not have that intention, then you're not a vicar of Christ. Vicar means a representation. See, if you look in the mirror image is a vicar of your face. All right. So if you look in the mirror and there's a gorilla that you see, then that's not a vicar of your. Well, let's hope so. Not a vicar of your face. You see, you'd say there's something wrong with this, and that's the point. A vicar is a reflection. He only has authority if he's doing what Christ intends. You see, and to assign all of this to Christ would be blasphemy. So that's the argument of Bishop Gerard de Laurier, and I think that he hit the nail right on the head, because he doesn't say too much and he doesn't say too little. In other words, there's a proper distinction to make there. In other words,
one of the themes of this year that we've seen in these interviews, and actually in last year as well, is this question of authority. You bring this up a lot, and I wonder sometimes, is it so clearly formed in you because you grew up in a time when authority was widespreadly correctly used in the family, at school, in the church, in the civil government? Yes. And today, authority is this nebulous idea, I think, for most of us. We haven't really grown up in a society in which those things were clearly enunciated. And what is authority? We see it exercised. And so it may be a hazy notion for the rest of us, and it's not a hazy notion for you.
Authority is the faculty to make law. Law has an intrinsic relationship to the common good. Law shows what the common good is. So a law would be false if it permitted or required something that was against the good of the society, or good of society, or of against the law of God, or something like that. An evil law, like permitting abortion. So that's an evil law. All right. So it's not a true law because it permits something that is evil. So authority and law are absolutely connected, and therefore you must intend the common good in order to have the authority. See, if you do not intend the common good, you don't have the authority. It's all connected like that. And so that's why if he does not intend to promote the Catholic faith and protect it, and et cetera, and act like the popes before him, if he does not have that intention, he doesn't have the authority, and his laws are null.
In these times of apostasy, Catholics will find in the pastors faithful to the mandate received from our Lord an example and an encouragement to remain in the truth of Christ. This is similar to Harrison Butker, Your Excellency. The sheep have to go on the internet, find people that work, and then they go seek out their shepherds. It's not really how it's supposed to work.
No, it's sad to see that what is happening, and that is that those who have retained the faith, I would say, are in a way transforming Catholicism into something very different from what it's meant to be, and that is that you have these monsters ruling the church, and you recognize them as true prelates, etc., with authority, but you resist them in practically everything and act as if they don't exist. That is not Roman Catholicism. It's all based on this authority of the Roman pontiff and of the hierarchy, and you resisting them is schism. See, but this has become, they never draw the conclusion. You go on YouTube and this happening today. It's awful, and look at this, and it's terrible, awful, terrible.
The hand wringing,
and the eye rolling, and what are we going to do? And this is awful, and that is not Roman Catholicism. To drag the hierarchy through the mud. These people that supposedly have a commission from Christ to rule the church.
Yeah, referring to the vicar of Jesus Christ on earth as some Argentinian clown, I suppose would not probably work with what authority is. Your Excellency.
That doesn't. It's becoming something else than Catholicism. This is what I call Novus Ordo conservatives, who refuse to take the position, that man is not the Pope.
Depositum custodians, according to the Apostles' exhortation, as the moment approaches in which I will have to give an account to the Son of God for all my actions, I intend to persevere in the bonum certamen, and not fail to bear the testimony of faith which is required of those who are honored as bishop of the fullness of the priesthood and constituted successor of the Apostles. 20th of June, 2024.
Yeah, that's very good. But you must resolve, Archbishop Viganò, the question of whether he is the Pope or not.
And whether Vatican II is a Catholic council or not.
And whether the council is a Catholic council, a valid Catholic council. Those things must be addressed.
And I suppose that same exhortation you're giving, Your Excellency, applies to people who are on, quote, Team Viganò and are fully supporting this and are championing this letter to the skies.
Again, yes, you must take a position with regard to whether that man is the Roman pontiff or not.
Why is that, Your Excellency?
Because
can't I just say I'm not sure, and our Lord will figure it out?
It'd be like saying I'm not sure if the Mass is valid or not, or the Holy Eucharist is valid or not. You must resolve that doubt and act according to the resolution of the doubt. Because you cannot, if something pertains to eternal salvation, you have to resolve the doubt in some way and act on your resolution. So you have to say, yes, I'm going to say he is the Pope, and act that way, and that means obey him, not drag him through the mud or resist him, and all that. That means obey him. Take the new Mass, all right, or else the traditional Mass in some sort of approved situation. See, if he is not, then you must act that way as well. There is and denounce him as not being Pope, and those are the only two Catholic positions. And there's things that would be consistent with Catholicism, but you can't just live in a twilight zone, so to speak, of doubt whether that man is the Pope or not. because your submission to the Pope is necessary for eternal salvation. That's defined dogma. Boniface VIII.
Well, listeners and watchers, if you enjoyed this content or you think it would be helpful to share with some of your friends, you can obviously share it, hit like, you can hit subscribe. If you'd like to support the work here at the seminary, you can send a super thanks or use any of the links that Father Disposito has provided in the description below to donate directly. You don't have to use YouTube if you don't wish to do that. As always, Your Excellency, thank you for taking the time to comment on this.
Not at all.